1777, Vermont issues the first ban on slavery. Rich people are like, so, by 1804, all of the northern states within the U.S. were in favor of abolishing slavery. Now, this doesn't mean that every person in the North was an abolitionist, and it doesn't mean that every single person in the South was an anti-abolitionist. In fact, most people in the South were like, we don't own slaves. This is more about the wealthy people in the South not wanting to abolish slavery. So the wealthy people in the South band together. We ain't abolishing nothing. They band together and decided that they would withdraw from the Union, aka the United States of America. And in order to get more people on board with the idea of withdrawing from America, they had some pretty serious scare tactics in place. Lincoln is gonna free these damn niggers. They gonna rape your wives, kill your kids, then they're gonna kill you. They're subhuman. They don't think like us. Matter of fact, they don't think. They just kill. So a lot of people in the South believed that and voted in favor of seceding from the North. But a lot of other whites in the South were like, get rid of these damn slaves so I can get me a decent job. I can't compete with no free labor. I don't want to secede. I like being part of the United States of America. You still feel that way? So the Southern USA regarded itself the Confederate and attempted to separate itself from the Union. Only thing gonna be free around here is moonshine, boy. Get the picking. And as the abolitionists of the North stood their ground, the country grew divided. With the South steadfast on keeping slavery legal, the slave population grew bigger and bigger because the Confederate, or the South, weren't budging. But in the same way that we have the Tea Party, which is an extremist minority group of the Republican Party, back in those days we had Copperhead Democrats. They were a minority group of Democrats who wanted to end the Civil War. These fools were in favor of maintaining slavery, and they believed they could use slavery to save the Union. They were initially called Copperheads because of their snake-like tendencies, but with some savvy marketing, the Copperhead label became a symbol of liberty. This is why I stress branding is so important. No, seriously. So Lincoln fired some warning shots around 1862. He let the country know. He's like, if you do not side with the Union and free the slaves, I'm going to issue an executive order. Right now, Jimmy, right now. I'm going to count to 100. You do it right now. But the southern states were unified and not one of them conceded. So in 1863, an executive order was issued by President Lincoln to free the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation went into effect in every single state except for one. Guess who? Texas. It was ordered upon 10 of 11 Confederate states in resistance to the free slave movement. And it also insisted that the Army and Navy acknowledge escaped slaves as free men, recruit them, and pay them. Progress, baby! It took about a year, but they even got Louisiana on board, okay? I'm all over the place right now. I need fact checkers. Was it 10 or 11 Confederate states? Post it in the comments below. Please provide your source along with it. I love you. The Emancipation Proclamation technically freed 3 million slaves, but not really. Due to the resistance of the South, slaves still had to escape their masters and make it to a free state. Think of it more like a safe zone. Another option was for slaves to wait until the Union Army had occupied the state that they were enslaved in. Quick question, what type of slave do you think you'd be? The type to escape or the type to wait for the Union Army to occupy the state you were enslaved in? Some slaves started running for their damn lives. I had to pause this recording to shave my nose hairs. Where were we? It took a couple of years, but before you know it, there were about 3 million, 4 million free slaves. Now, this didn't mean that the country instantaneously embraced blacks. Oh, you're free. You're one of us now. No, actually, racism sustained until... Now, with the abolishing of slavery, wealthy folks were salty because without free labor, the Southern economy was hurting. Forest squirting, fine. I'm kidding. No, but seriously, the Southern economy was in trouble. And slaves were now homeless. Their flesh wounds still fresh, no money, no food, no medical assistance, basically no resources. Think the black, naked, and afraid with no camera crew and no whip scars. Delaware and Kentucky, slavery stayed legal in them joints right up until 1865. I'm going as fast as I can. Jeez. But meanwhile, in the background, an amendment to the Constitution was being crafted to officiate the ending of slavery. The 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment. It was passed by Senate in 1864 and came into effect December 1865. While everyone was celebrating the abolition of slavery, dealing with the aftermath of the Civil War, and protesting the violation of white rights, Congress's sneaky asses were slipping tricky language into the Constitution that stated though slavery was abolished, it would still be legal by punishment of crime. And just like that, the prison population went from 95% white males to 95% black males. How we let them do this? Just to be clear, while common folk were fighting against one another over the abolition of slavery or celebrating the abolition of slavery, political officials and wealthy slave owners were crafting a loophole. Like I said, some things never change. Anyway, just like that, The prison population went from 95% white males to 95% black males. But how? How could you arrest that many black people so quickly? I'll tell you how. Black code and pig law. Let's break them down, starting with black code. Black marriage, legalized. Black ownership of property, legalized. Blacks were allowed some access to the courts but could not testify against whites. Blacks were forced to sign long-term contracts with their former slave masters who still refused to pay them. So blacks would often work for their former slave masters for almost a year without pay. Blacks could not challenge their slave masters in the court of law because then they would have to testify against whites, which at the time was illegal. Blacks could not accept employment without approval from their former employer or slave master. Those laws were repealed in 1866, and in came pig law, which was the answer to the repeal of black code. Pig law went as follows: jobless while black, illegal, illegal. Loitering while black, illegal, illegal, illegal. Stealing bread while black, 5-year sentence. Blacks were like, man, we got to get out of here. So they started taking railroad cars to the north, but then the south got hip to it. Standing near railroad while black, illegal. Riding railroad cars while black, illegal. Basic misdemeanors came with extremely harsh sentences and fines. And if a black person couldn't pay those fines, they went to Bank of America and got a loan. No, they went to jail. Blacks were not allowed on juries. Most blacks couldn't afford to hire a lawyer. No blacks that I know of were afforded public defendants, which pretty much quadrupled the prison population and began the convict lease system. The convict lease system.
The convict lease system.
Starving homeless blacks, aka free slaves, were arrested and given harsh sentences, most of the time for menial crime, then leased off by the county sheriffs and judges to coal mining companies, contractors of bridge and railroad repair, farmers, and quite often their former slave masters. And unfortunately, many freed blacks were arrested and died in captivity anyway. The death toll of legal slaves then jumped up to about 40 or 50% because it wasn't in the best interest of those who leased slaves to take care of them when they could just get a new one, like an iPhone or a toupee. So pig law and the 13th Amendment pretty much reversed everything the abolitionists had accomplished. And that drama sustained well into the Jim Crow era. If you've never heard of the Jim Crow laws, my fact checkers will provide that information in the comments below with their sources, right? Thank you, fact checkers. Fact checkers, I got you. Sending some of y'all t-shirts. I love you. So blacks were like, forget this. And by the early 1900s, blacks had united in the northern part of Tulsa, Oklahoma, successfully establishing their own version of Wall Street. We're talking 30 plus grocery stores, 20 plus restaurants, 20 plus churches. No, not churches, chicken idiot. Movie theaters, schools, library, a bank. You know how hard it is to get your own bank? 2 prominent black hospitals, a post office, their own public transportation system. 6 of the black people in that community owned their own planes. And this was all black owned. $1 circulated in this community for up to a year before leaving the community. This black community in the northern region of Tulsa, Oklahoma was booming. Well, right up until the Ku Klux Klan caught up to it in 1921. We're talking air raids leaving 3,000 African Americans in the community dead. This was the original Oklahoma bomb. Every business, every school, every church burned to the ground. The Ku Klux Klan even burned down the community's 2 hospitals. 3,000 African Americans dead. The puzzling thing is that the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995, which left 168 dead, is recorded as the worst terrorist attack to occur on U.S. soil. 168, 3,000. 168, 3,000. I agree. All lives should matter. Apparently, these 3,000 did not. The moral to the story is selective history pisses people off. It was like every time African Americans took a step forward, the hateful opposition would knock them a couple steps back. So here's what we have so far. We had all these united Americans, black, white, and everything in between, working to free the slaves, only to have free blacks enslaved once again. A black community who worked so hard despite the opposition, built its own Wall Street, its own schools, its own educational system, its own bank, massacred, bombed, burned down. Let's see what my fact checkers came up with. The Jim Crow laws were segregation laws on the state and local level put in place after the Reconstruction period of the South. You know, anti-integration, keeping blacks out of politics, white schools, and white women. Segregation of public transportation, restrooms, restaurants, water fountains. This is video? Why are you so stupid? So blacks started fighting to get into the white schools because without education and opportunity, life is pretty bleak. But them Jim Crow laws were like, hell no. Hell no. The Jim Crow laws continued until they were overruled by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Damn, I was conceived just 2 years later. Yup, I grew up to Ivan Putski, Andre the Giant, and Jake the Snake Roberts. Y'all want to see some ugly hands? The 70s was so deep. 1971, that's right around the time Nixon declared the war on drugs.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
So John Ehrlichman, Nixon's chief domestic advisor, did an interview with Harper's Magazine in 1994. He spoke quite openly about why he and Nixon orchestrated the war on drugs. No embellishments whatsoever. This is what he had to say. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And there you have it, straight from one of the creators of the war on drugs. I don't know, man. Sound like people got different definitions for democracy. Whoa, wait a minute. So you're saying that the war on drugs was actually a war on hippies and blacks. Why would the news lie about that? Doesn't make any sense. That's just a conspiracy theory. This is America. Fact checkers, please. Wait a minute. Fact checkers, if you want to win one of these beautiful t-shirts, just go to prisonlogic.com and post your facts there. Now, where was I? The war on hippies and blacks continues to this very day. I think Nelson Rockefeller, then governor of New York, got in on it too. He was like, give them life without parole, even if they're a juvenile, with no chance of repeal. And that's how the mandatory drug possession charge became a minimum sentence of 15 years. You better get that money, 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 get that money. Before you know it, the whole country was on the bandwagon. Remember how I was talking about the convict lease system? Well, it was so profitable, it began to revive economies across the country, and every state wanted in. Big money prisons were gaining major influence on Capitol Hill. They began paying politicians to push for harsher laws and longer sentences, longer sentences. You better get that money, get that money, get that money, get that money. Here we were in the 1970s, and blacks, who had only made up 13% of the U.S. population, made up 41% of the prison population. Get that money. Put it like this: 1 out of every 4 black men went to jail. So while blacks and whites fought side by side to help blacks gain the right to vote, 1 in 4 black men were being incarcerated and revoked of their right to vote. Get it? Then came the 80s, the Reagan era. And this mug had the nerve to declare war on drugs. Talk about history repeating itself, good lord. So this go round, the Reagan administration labels the Sandinistas of the Nicaraguan government a socialist government that must be overthrown for democracy. To do so, the Reagan administration provided financial aid to the Contras, who were in opposition of the Sandinistas. But once the U.S. discovered that the Contras were also using drug money to fund their rebellion, U.S. Congress was like, and they cut off all funds to the Contras. Then Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, or whatever his rank is, comes up with what he labels a neat idea. He was like, we don't need Congress. We can sell guns to Iran. Take that money and give it to the Contras. Congress ain't gotta know nothing. That's not gonna be enough. So we got his boy, Oscar Danilo Blandon from Nicaragua. Oscar had drugs wholesale and a connect in California named Freeway Rick Ross. And Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North proceeds with this plan. We gonna act like we don't know. Let my boy Oscar bring his drugs into the USA. His connect, Freeway Rick Ross, is gonna push the drug to the most vulnerable black communities in California. Then spread to St. Louis, New Orleans, Texas, Kansas City, Oklahoma, North Carolina, South Carolina, Indiana, Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Ohio. Oh, I forgot Seattle. He'll take some of that drug money and use that to fund the Contras too. Boom! And we're back in business with Nicaragua. Democracy. I don't know. Fact checkers. Anyway, Oliver North eventually got busted. He served 3 years in prison. His connect and drug lord Oscar Danilo Blandon served 2 years in worked with the DEA to help bring down Freeway Rick Ross, who ended up serving 25 years because that's the black penalty for selling drugs in the United States of America. Was it 25 years? Fact checkers, I need your help, because I do believe that Freeway Rick Ross's sentence was 5 times longer than Oliver North and Oscar Danilo Blandon's sentences combined. I'm not glorifying Freeway Rick Ross for being so eager to sell out his own community, but I do think it's interesting that Oliver North, who orchestrated the whole thing, was able to sit in front of the Supreme Court and say, I thought it was a neat idea, and only served 3 years. How we let them do this? Guess who else served time? All the black drug addicts, mamas with crack baby, drug affiliates, etc. And that pretty much devastated much of what was left of the black community. It's so insightful how government has the ability to declare a war on drugs just before the drugs are pumped into the community. Black is beautiful, but black is also highly abused and highly incarcerated, has been since 1865. For instance, the convict lease system. The convict lease system has been so successful and so profitable that even private prisons are making a killing in the prison industrial complex. Did you know that the private prison industry lobbied for harsher and longer sentences and for the right to detain immigrants who were supposed to be deported? They spent $45 million bribing folks on Capitol Hill. $45 million bribing folks on Capitol Hill and in the mainstream media. Do you know what the private prison industry grosses per year? $5.1 billion. I could buy like 10 fishing kayaks with that. The profitable convict lease system is part of the reason that this war on drugs theme is so popular. Still, today, 1 out of 4 black men will be incarcerated. Luckily, out of the 4 black men in my family, I was the brother who went to jail, thank God. Well, me and Tijuana Jackson, that's why I'm crazy. Speaking of history repeating itself, I can't forget Bill Clinton's war on drugs. He signed the 1994 crime bill, didn't he? And his wife coined the term super predator, which basically means these damn niggers. Super predator. They gon' rape your wives. Super predator. Kill your kids, then they gon' kill you. Super predator. They're subhuman. Super predator. They don't think like us. Super predator. Matter of fact, they don't think, which really helped beef up the prison population and the convict lease system. You know what? History ain't nothing but a one-trick pony. With all the opposition I've just mentioned, we have still managed to produce some of the world's top artists, some of the world's top entrepreneurs, some of the world's top athletes, a black president. How did I forget Kanye? Some of the world's top fashionistas. Y'all know what we need, right? Modern day abolitionists. Look at it like this. The more you buy into the concept that putting nonviolent people in jail for extreme amounts of time is a good idea, the more jobs you lose to the convict lease system. Sound familiar? Is history predictable or what? Look, it's really simple. While you're pointing your finger at immigrants, the very same politicians we allow to divide us are the ones who promote the campaign that help to beef up the convict leasing system and the prison industrial complex. Is it clicking a little bit? And the larger those industries grow, the smaller the job market becomes. I don't know about you, but I need my family protected from that dude who went to jail for smoking weed over a ping pong injury. I gotta drink some water on that. Really though, it's the same trick over and over. Kick them out, arrest them, and make us feel safe. Here's another way to look at it, and I'm not being sarcastic. Actually, I am being sarcastic. The safer politicians claim they will make you feel, the less livelihood you have, the less job opportunities you have, the less of a future your children have. But hey, keep them pot smokers off the streets. History repeating itself. History is starting to look like a Ferris wheel. You should be assembling military uniforms. You should be building furniture for high-rise office buildings. You should be farming tilapia. You should be assembling headphones for the leading manufacturers. You should be molding dentures for dentists across the country. You should be upholstering chairs for furniture manufacturers. You should be transcribing textbooks into Braille. You should be producing frozen food for the leading fast food chain. You should be answering the phones at these call centers. You should be providing telecommunication services to America's leading cellular companies. You should be sewing lingerie for America's most adored lingerie outlets. You should be sewing those made in the USA tags onto garments. You should be taking reservations for America's top airlines and not for 26 cents an hour either. Oh yeah, that's what non-violent criminals get paid in prison. Yeah, that's right, 16 to 26 cents when you should be doing those same jobs for $16 to $26. So you see how it works, right? The convict lease system, the private prison industry invests as much money as it does in media because it needs you to buy into the narrative that the unjust incarceration of blacks who are given sentences up to 5 times longer than white offenders for the exact same crime is justified. You get what I'm saying? And the more you buy into it, the more you lose your job to non-violent offenders. And remember, this has been going on since 1865. 1865. And yes, we got black on black crime, we got white on white crime, Asian on Asian crime, Latino on Latino crime. But think about this. If 1 out of every 4 men in your neighborhood, no, wait, let me do it over. So if 1 in 4, 25% of the male figure in your community were guaranteed to go to prison, and if it had been that way since 1865, and if that were the best ratio that had ever existed since 1865, do you think going to gladiator school and coming back into the neighborhood could make you more violent? Think about this. Some parents don't send their kids to certain schools because they're worried about their kids being bullied or being picked on, and these dynamics can make their kids depressed, and it can also make their kids incredibly violent. Don't you think that that environment could have an influence on the way in which people behave when they get out of jail? No? Doesn't cross your mind? Yes? Talk to me. Anyway, that is the covert black history of the USA. I think it's hypocritical to speak of American history without speaking about the prison industrial complex. If you would like to see more content that supports the truth, please click the link and show social media support for my up-and-coming movie, Prison Logic. Click that link right there. That one. Click that one. No, click this one. I want you to love me. Do you love me? Because I love me like the one above me. Let's not let history repeat itself again and again. Because every time history repeats itself, it ends up putting you out of money.